morning to all of you. You seem to be very quiet. Is it the breakfast? No. Subdued, quite subdued. Maybe because it's last day, or perhaps the first half of this audience part is empty. Okay. Well, very nice to be here. It's always a pleasure to meet Rajesh's students in the summer school, because you come with very varied ways of thinking from varied background, and it's always a learning experience to be with students with various disciplines, fresh thinking, curiosity, and so on. Because after a while, once you start doing particularly philosophy, your curiosity seems to dwindle. So I get my curiosity freshened up when I'm with you. So thanks for being here and listening to me. I would have a tough morning, I should admit, because frankly, I wouldn't know how many of you have read literature in this area. At least a couple of people in the audience I know, they are familiar with, but that's very few. So my job is tough, particularly because at some point I may have to explain it in a very introductory level, and at some point I may have to use a language which will be, or which could be qualified as jargonated. So you may have to pardon me, or you may have to stop me at that time and ask me further questions. Is that okay? I guess you're more adept in symbolic language, shaking head, no sounds, right? All right, good. Well, I'm going to assume that all of you have heard consciousness, and Rajesh has told me that, he has convinced me that at least you have heard the word consciousness since you have attended this summer school. So 2 weeks is a good lot of time to get acquainted with a word which has now conquered the attention and interest of people all around the globe in the last, let's say about last 20 to 30 years. And that wouldn't mean that consciousness is a topic which has emerged suddenly, Consciousness is a topic which has been in the center of human inquiry since thousands of years. But the English description of consciousness has made it more popular, more accessible to various people. But consciousness in terms of inquiry into oneself has been an attempt which many people have done from various disciplines. So for example, if you take take the disciplines of biology and medicine, you would see several contributions from Greece, India, Egypt, all ancient civilizations. So why I'm saying this is we should not misunderstand that consciousness is a very popular theme which has emerged in the last 2 or 3 decades. It could be, but consciousness in its purest form or in its varied form is a subject which has received attention from ancient times. So when you take the disciplinary background of biology and medicine, several philosophers, psychologists, well, thousands of years ago, I guess all of them were known as philosophers, only that later then science came in. So medicine was a very interesting topic for very many people. There is also a philosophical engagement into this subject, and you would know some of the works in our own tradition, the Upanishadic tradition, where there is very engaged discussion on several aspects of consciousness. But of course, we don't have time to discuss that. But then very subtle, very deeper levels of consciousness and human interactions and human living is discussed in the Upanishads. The couple of other very well-known philosophers are Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. They have also written quite a bit, engaged with people, experimented with their own lives to understand consciousness. Another discipline today which is very much interested in consciousness, is psychiatry and psychology. And again, such an interest also is not very new, because if you look at texts like Charaka Samhita or Aristotle's De Anima, you would see that there are several discussions which try to connect human mind and human living and the constituents of human body that influence your mental processes. Well, with this small introduction to bring to your attention that consciousness is not a topic of just recent interest, but it has a history which dates back to ancient times, I wish to bring in a couple of people to your attention, names of a couple of people to your attention, and how or why they are important. Consciousness is a topic which is very much involved with human living, and therefore your medical condition, your neural condition, your brain condition, your psychiatric and psychological condition. Medicine has always practiced, psychiatric medicine has always practiced documenting cases of people with various dispositions. But then that method would be in general an archival method, an archiving and documenting, but not using that literature in a literary manner or in a manner to tell stories to other people and make their life a very lived one. Such an attempt was first made by the very popular name, most of you would know, Vilayenur Ramachandran, right? His book, Phantoms in the Brain, 1998, caught so much attention that people suddenly woke up from a dream or something and started thinking of consciousness in a completely dynamic fashion. And why perhaps his book got so much interest is that, one, he's a very good storyteller. So we all like to hear stories, particularly stories about our own minds, about our own living, how the world impinges upon us if the brain acts in a slightly different manner. So Vilayenur Ramachandran, you would see that he takes to a personal report, a storytelling, and thereby relating to a person's mind and heart, which is very important for someone who is dealing with people. Now, this is the situation in the medical field of medical documentation, which brought in, I would think, very many other contributions. There are so many other names, but why I think we should remember Vilayenur Ramachandran is the engaged manner in which he brought in psychiatric discourse in consciousness studies. There are two other people who are also very equally interesting to, for our knowledge, and it's important to know them. And they are philosophers. If you are here in this audience, they would know. One is Dave Chalmers, and the other, I mean, according to me, is Thomas Metzinger, but then I think we'll just focus on David Chalmers for the time being. David Chalmers, around the same time, perhaps a couple of years before Vilayenur Ramachandran published his book in 1998, to be precise, Dave Chalmers published his article in Scientific American in 1995, The Puzzle of Conscious Experience. And until then, consciousness was more or less a very abstract subject for a philosopher's imagination or lack of imagination. But Chalmers brought it into a very live manner to the forefront and made a few distinctions which made the problem of consciousness much more accessible. Because the immediate tendency, once you hear about consciousness, is to think that it's a very abstract topic, and perhaps a common man, a common person, wouldn't be able to understand or apprehend its intricacies. So perhaps aware of this, Chalmers, what he did is, he distinguished two major problems in consciousness studies, and you might be already aware of it, but since for the sake of all of your interest, the two kinds of problems which he distinguished are, one he termed as the easy problems, and the other is the heart problem. Easy problems with the plural and the heart problem in a singular. Easy problems, according to him, is how do we have vision? How do we hear? So what are the visual mechanisms? What are the mechanisms going in the brain that finally gives us the visual experience? How do we have sensations? How does the various physiological processes work in our body to give something called a visual experience or a sensory experience? So easy problems basically deals with the different kinds of neural, chemical and physiological processes to give rise to a sensation, right? Basic experience. And this, why he termed as easy, it's not that it's so easy, it's not that people are found all about vision and other mechanisms, other sensations. He called it easy because, in a relative fashion, because he believes that according to the progress in brain scanning equipments, in progress in understanding brain and medical technologies, we will be able to find out the exact route that lead to these sensory experiences, and therefore easy, but not easy for perhaps in the coming 2-3 decades. It may take another few decades to have all these sensory experiences very nicely laid out and trace the path from the brain to the final experience of it. Heart problem is very interesting, and for Chalmers that is what is more interesting. His puzzle is about the heart problem. Heart problem is how does various neural processes, which are discrete, quantitative, physical, these are the characteristics of the neural processes. They are physical, right? Because they happen in a biological organ called the brain. It's an organ. It's the smartest organ in our body. So they are physical processes, neural physical processes, and discrete. It's not that everything happens in one point. Actually, lots of parallel processing and synchronized activity happen in the brain. So multiple centers, multiple areas, very complex ways of processing happens in the brain. So they are very discrete in nature. These processes are discrete, and also it's not just physical, they're also neurochemical. About 100 chemicals are involved in the fine-tuning of brain's functioning, which in general parlance called as the neurotransmitters. So there are neurochemical processes, there are neural processes, chemical processes, they are discrete and physical. Physical is the word which you had to underline. All the other could be subsumed under the word physical. So how does something which is physical give rise to something which is subjective? Because you don't see the brain processes, you only get to experience it. So experience is the product of a physical process. How can a physical process, which is discrete and quantitative, give rise to an experience which is subjective, qualitative, and most importantly, unitary? The brain processes are located in very many places in the brain, but your experience is unitary. You never have a doubt that I have this experience. I mean, in certain conditions you may have, but then that's more in a satirical fashion, but not in a real fashion. You never doubt whether you have such experience, right? And you have one experience. You don't see discrete components of that experience. You have an experience. It's more unitary. We'll get back to that issue a little later. But what I wanted to convey to you is that how the heart problem is different from the easy problems is by pausing the subjectivity of consciousness or the non-physical nature of consciousness. Or the riddle is, how can the physical give rise to the subjective? How can a physical process give rise to subjective? You may have answers. All of us would have some answers, but the matter of fact is, none of these answers until today has been sufficient enough to stop asking this question again and again. So, let me stop there and let me get your attention to ask 5 basic questions which are posed by the hard problem of consciousness. I'm hoping you are with me at this point, and if you are not, you can stop me or I can stop you looking at some of your faces, but I don't want to do that. I'm hoping that you will stop me whenever, you know, I'm much too away from you. So do please feel free to stop me. There are 5 questions which are embedded in the hard problem of consciousness. And again, I repeat, hard problem of consciousness is basically how does something which is quantitative, physical and discrete give rise to something which is qualitative, unitary and subjective. So what are the 5 questions which are embedded in the hard problem or inspired by the hard problem? First question is, like in any other subject, is definition. How do we define consciousness? Because it all depends upon defining what is consciousness. You may say that there's no hard problem. It's just a matter of linguistic usage, or it's just a matter of expression. You may say that. So defining consciousness is very important. There are ways in which you can define consciousness such that the hard problem just vaporizes away. At the end of the definition, you wouldn't find a hard problem. But then, that is the advantage of that question, and it's not a solution in itself for the hard problem. So what is consciousness? Defining consciousness is extremely important. And why I'm repeating this is, as young students, you would know that whenever you deal with a complex problem, it's very important to demarcate the limit of the problem as you would see it, as you would pursue it. Because once you get a little grasp of a complex problem, you will be able to handle it better. Not only handle it better, you would have a perspective which would tell you that this is one aspect of it, not the full of it. And therefore, you'll be able to have a grand view, a vantage point of view. And this is extremely important because once we have the part-whole view of a complex problem, you wouldn't ever equate the part with the whole, or you wouldn't feel that the problem is solved just because I'm seeing it in that particular manner. So basically, the question, what is consciousness, can be approached in very many manners. One is to define consciousness as an object, in whichever discipline it is, as an object. The other is a concept which helps you to bring in perhaps certain other complex properties or like. And the other is to define consciousness as a subject, as a self, who is the center of experience. And of course, I like the third part, and I work more on that. It's not that I don't like the first part, which is to turn into an object, because many times you would just wish that if only consciousness was an object, then for a lot many things I don't have to take responsibility for certain silly things I do in life, the mistakes and faux pas I make in life. Only the subjective part of consciousness makes you serious about ethical questions, your own involvement, your responsibility to yourself, self-commitment, and a purpose and meaning for life. And that's why the subject aspect of consciousness has interested psychologists, psychiatrists, and philosophers in the same degree. Now, consciousness can also be defined as a part of something. And in fact, you may even say that it's not a part, it is what it is, there's nothing more to it. The other is to define consciousness as a function, and that is very predominant. People who are familiar with this area would know that to define consciousness as a neural function is actually the most prevalent or most popular way of looking at it, and therefore coming to the brain consciousness identity theory. The other is to look at consciousness as an organic whole. And whenever we talk about organicity, we are talking about parts which amount to give a whole which is more than the parts put together. So, therefore, the whole can never be understood in terms of the parts, Because the parts added together is going to give you something more than these parts by themselves. And that is the riddle there. You can never understand whole by just putting the parts together. Because the game of the whole is always more than the parts. We definitely have very interesting journeys in this, but the whole is not going to be there even if you put the parts together. So that's what is called as an organic, wholesome, or organicity. So that's the first question. I hope you remember. For a change, I might even ask you questions. I understand you ask lots of questions. So for a change, I might even ask you questions. Which is the first question? Which is the second question? So the hard problem of consciousness, as we've seen, there would be 5 issues embedded in that, in the hard problem. First is defining consciousness itself. The second is, where is consciousness located? The locale of consciousness. Actually, it's like, daily life. Someone tells you about a person with a name and with a particular, physical structure and so on. And then your question would be, can you tell me a little more about that person? How does he look? What does he wear? How is his hair? What's the color of his eye? So you want a definition of the unknown. The unknown always inspires us to begin with a minimal definition, at least minimal. It's not that you give me the history of that person, let me read all his history, then I'll meet him. No, isn't it? When someone tells you about a person who's not known to you, you wouldn't say, oh, let me look at his history. It's not that. You just want a minimal definition. What you say, and then you feel that, okay, now I get an idea of that person. So the defining consciousness is that minimalistic, important kind. The second is, where is consciousness located? Right? You would like to know where such a person stays, where does he live, because sometimes spaces where we live also tells more about the people who inhabit those spaces. I mean, architecturally, neurally as well. So where is consciousness located? So if you say, okay, consciousness is located in the neuronal areas of the brain, then it's going to tell you something about that particular nature of consciousness, the nature of that particular kind of consciousness which is situated in those neuronal areas. So one response to such a question is, consciousness is located in the brain, which means, simply put, different aspects of your experience, your sensory experiences, your memories, your thoughts, your judgments, our fears, security, sense of security, insecurities, happiness, pleasure, joy, etc., they all have a nice, neat place in the brain. They're all beautifully housed in the brain. So that's one theory. So people, seriously, neurologists at one point believed that there are very nice niches, marked for these various human expressions in the brain. Of course, that view is now challenged, because now it is found that brain is not such a simple, innocent organ. Brain is playing the game of locating one function in very many places. Very, very intelligent. So it's like a detective piece. You will not be able to see the various points of the puzzle at one point. You have to you have to search in various places. So, but still, the theory that there are certain prominent areas for functions of the brain and marked in the brain, that theory is not in vogue. But still, it is not completely dismissed. For example, still there's a discussion on the 2 hemispheres of the brain and how these hemispheres, 2 halves of the brain, how these halves, distribute their work. That theory is still in discussion. Also, there are, enough discussions on the placement of memory. In fact, that is the most interesting discussion happening in the last 1 or 2 years. The place of emotions, place of memories. Because most of the areas in the brain which inhabit memories and emotions happen to be subcortical areas which goes back to the reptilian times. It's not part of the neocortex, which has developed in terms of human evolution. So, but in any case, the idea is to is to understand that one of the response to where is consciousness is that consciousness is located in the brain. Very simple, neat theory. And there's a nice name if you would like to, and people always like acronyms. So this acronym is called NCC. Neural Correlates of Consciousness. We all like acronyms, right? Because acronym suddenly brings us a sense of technicality. Oh, I see, you know. So that kind of a sense. So neuronal correlates of consciousness are supposed to be the answer for where is consciousness to a few people. And there are very, very interesting philosophers and neurologists who very nicely argue, very clearly and cleanly argue about it, but of course we can have a counter-argument as well. Another theory related to the neural correlates is the idea which perhaps some of you have read, inspired by a very interesting writer. He is a neurologist and also a neuropsychologist. He is Antonio Damasio. Very many books have been written by him. And why he got into sudden fame, not because of all of his books, but because of one term which he used in his book. You know that term, right? What is that term? I'm sure you would know that. It's called as somatic markers. Somatic markers. This is the most fashionable term which we use today. Certainly it has brought in a lot of insights. It has connected body and mind, it has connected body and brain, it has connected brain and mind. So according to him, we have to also look at the relevance of emotions in influencing the conscious experience. And according to him, inspired by our good old William James, that emotions are actually physical processes. See, in a day-to-day parlance, when we talk about emotions, emotions is something which is in my mind, right? You would say, you never know my emotion. It is so secret in my mind. You know, you really have to know me to know my emotion. But then, James said, no, it's not like that. According to James, and inspired later, Damasio inspired by James, according to both these people, emotions are physical processes. Physical processes which are designed to motivate you to into an action in order to escape from your prey or to escape from your predator and eat up your prey. You understand what I'm saying, right? These days also we do have preys and predators. We even have expressions, oh, that person almost ate me up. You know, you say that. Or I was completely eaten up, or I really want to kill you. Those kind of expressions. So, attacking or including, so friendship, making friends with, or being away with. So, somatic markers are these physical processes which go on in your brain, in your subcortical areas, particularly your subcortical areas, to motivate into an action of fight or flight. So either you fight with him, finish him off, or go straight into his digestive system. So either get eaten up by him or, you know, escape from him. The basic evolutionary paradigm. So emotions are physical processes. But then, how can we understand that? I mean, you may object to it, right? So that's why, slightly different from James, Damasio distinguishes emotions from feelings. So according to him, emotions are processes which happens in a subconscious or unconscious level. Because you don't know about it. You're not aware of the various processes going on in your brain. But then you're aware of something. Like, oh, I really feel very happy today. Or you say, oh, I don't know, something is wrong. I don't feel very good this morning. You know, I mean, various kinds of emotions. We can almost spend a day on the nuances of emotions which we have in mind. So how can you accept that when you say emotion is a process which is happening in an unconscious level? That's not fair, because I go through my emotions. In fact, I find it very hard to deal with my emotions. Right? Most of my day is spent in having a good, control over my emotions, so dealing with your emotions. So that's why Damasio, very intelligently, and others of course, I'm saying Damasio because he's one of the pioneers in this. he distinguished emotions and feelings. According to him, feelings are the conscious expressions of emotions which happen in the subconscious, unconscious level. So he distinguished two things he did. First is he brought in emotions as a major component of conscious experience. For most of us who are slightly or more obsessed with the idea of rationality and the processes of rationality as governing human behavior, got a bolt from Damasio. He said that, not really. Actually your emotions are going to guide your decision-making processes. So he distinguished feelings and emotions. Emotions are physical processes. Feelings are the real feelings. Feeling, there's no other term to describe feelings. It's really what you feel. If you feel angry, whatever you feel, that's called as the feeling of being angry in an anger. So according to him, feelings happen in a conscious level, but then what lead to these feelings happen in a subconscious level. You may object to that as well, and there are many people who object, especially in the field of emotion studies. But it's very important to remember Damasio in that context, that he made this distinction and brought in the field of emotion studies into a serious topic. And today, if you look at a journal which started perhaps a few years back, called Emotion Review, you would be so fascinated to see the kind of discussions happening on emotions, the role of emotions not only in decision making, but in leading to making you and me a sane person. All right. So we were discussing about where is consciousness, and one possibility, one response to that is the neural correlates. Damasio also believes in it to a large extent, and somatic markers is one of his theory to again say that the fine-tuning of conscious experience is actually done by your brain and the body, and not anything abstract. Another idea for the question where is consciousness located is there's a very interesting term called qualia. And people who are familiar with this area would be very much aware of it, because this term has been used and abused and dismissed and again brought in back to attention. So it gets a lot of push and attack from all sides. Sometimes it's loved, sometimes it's dismissed. But anyway, qualia seems to be with somebody with a hard skin. Nothing happens to qualia. Qualia is still being discussed very much since it started, I don't know how many years back. But basically, qualia says that all our experiences have a qualitative nature in it, a quale to it. And that qualitative nature cannot be explained by the functional properties or the functional processes of the brain. So basically, qualia is the subjectivity or the subjective nature of your experience, that I experience it. That I experiencing something cannot be explained by the discrete processes or the physical locations of consciousness. Now, the third question. So, two questions. What is consciousness? Where is consciousness located? So, how can consciousness be defined to begin with? Second question, where is consciousness located? Can we have a location for consciousness? Third is slightly related to this second question. How is consciousness produced? Because the question itself anticipates that consciousness is either an emergent property or it is a result of it's an effect which is the result of a causal mechanism. So there are various theories, I wouldn't go into it, but basically consciousness would be conceived as an effect or as an emergent or as a property of something which goes before it. And the one discipline which is very much into this field is neuropharmacology and the influence of substances on our bloodstream to give various kinds of, when I said substances, I hope you understood what I meant. Starting from tobacco to LSD to marijuana. What are the influence of these substances in our bloodstream? How does it give you a kick? Without having an electron in your brain, the same can be done with a little bit of this and give you a kick. How does that happen? So consciousness is basically a process, a function, a property or a function which is ensuing of very complex neurochemical process happening in your brain. There are also single neuron studies, which I guess if you heard Arun, I don't know if Arun spoke to you, he works on the area. Single neuron studies focusing on a particular neuron and a few very specific cognitive mechanisms and trying to understand how does consciousness emerge from such a limited context. Now, the fourth question is, which is more a generalist question in the heart problem is, when in the evolutionary scale or the evolutionary history did consciousness emerge? Does it have a time? Like all of us have a date of birth, does consciousness have a date of birth? Was it good enough? Some people say that consciousness date of birth starts from unicellular protozoan times, you know. So no discussion is possible there. There's no argument because you're going to unicellular organisms, protozoan types, you can't even have a discussion on this. But then there is also a little more specialized way of looking at it, where consciousness started, and some of you are in this audience who works on those beings called primates, non-human primates. So advanced level of reflection, introspection, and self-identity, bodily identification, starts not just in humans, but also chimpanzees, orangutans, and even dolphins seems to have some amount of self-awareness. So the idea is to say that consciousness is not something which had a recent origin. Of course, there is a dispute to it, and the dispute is that consciousness, as we talk, is something which is much more sophisticated, humanly unique, and therefore cannot be compared with lesser functions in the non-human primates. It has to be discussed in a totally different context. But in any case, if we have time, we can discuss it a little later. But mainly here, the functions and the levels of self-recognition and self-awareness are studied in order to understand how consciousness is different in non-human primates and in humans. Now, this is the fourth question. The fifth question of the heart problem, which is actually my favorite